I finally have it. The iFlight Commando 8. Now, reality can be whatever I want. The iFlight Commando 8 is finally here, and like when Thanos got that last Infinity Stone, in a way it closes out the set of gamepad-styled radios with the option of having Express LRS built in. And the others in that set include the Jumper T Pro and the Radiomaster Zorro, both of which I've reviewed. So what we're going to do in this video is take a close look at the iFlight Commando 8 and see if it was really all worth waiting for. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today.
I finally rest.
No. Shut up, Thanos.
Watch the sunrise on a grateful universe.
Nobody will ever appreciate you, Thanos. No matter how much good you do in the world, someone will always resent you for it. I want to start this video like I start most of my recent controller reviews by pointing out that there are some things that are nearly the same about most FPV-focused radio controllers today. And once we've got that out of the way, then we'll focus on the things that make it different. And what makes these radios similar is the operating system that they run. So if we power up here,
welcome to EdgeTX.
we can see that it's running EdgeTX. Thank you for that. Hold on. Shh. We can see that it's running EdgeTX. And much like if you are used to Microsoft Windows or Mac OS and you sit down in front of a new computer that's running Windows or Mac OS, you're going to be familiar with where things are because it doesn't matter who made the computer. The operating system is pretty much what defines the layout and features of the computer. And that's the same thing for these controllers. So they run EdgeTX. They have the same programmability. They have the same way that they're configured and so forth. And I've got tutorials on that stuff. But since that doesn't differentiate what is going to make you choose this radio versus one of the others, that's not something we're going to focus super heavy on in this video. Suffice it to say, you can bind the radio to various receivers. You can use the radio to control various receivers. The range of the system is something that's going to differentiate. The radios do differ there. But in terms of, can you configure the channels? Can you configure mixes? Can you configure outputs? Can you display information on this screen and so forth? All of these radios are essentially going to be identical. Now, it's pretty normal that a gamepad style controller like the Commando would have fewer knobs and switches and buttons than a great big honkin' radio like this Radiomaster TX16S that is my daily driver. You're choosing a gamepad style radio for two main reasons. One is that you like the ergonomics, the way it fits into your hand, and the other is that you want something smaller. A lot of people love the fact that you can grab a radio like this and just sort of toss it into a backpack, and it doesn't have, look at all these switches hanging off here and all these things that can be broken in a great big honking screen that can be stabbed by a screwdriver or a pen. And this little thing is going to be way more durable and way more resistant or tolerant of abuse. And it's just going to take up less space. But I have to say, the Commando 8 has really gone to an extreme in cutting down on the number of controls you've got, because you've got two 3-position switches here, 1, 2, 3, down, middle, up, and two 2-position switches here. That's nice. Unlike the Jumper T Pro, which gave you momentary switches, you can use this, for example, as an arm and disarm pretty easily. It doesn't have any momentary switches that automatically release when you release them, but okay, I guess I can just hit the button twice, once to start the beeper and once to stop it. And it doesn't have any knobs, and it doesn't really have any trim switches or sliders, or it doesn't have anything. It's literally got 1, 2, 3, 4 controls, and that's it. Now, maybe that's enough for you, but if you know for a fact that it's not, then you're going to be maybe steering away from this one. Now, just for perspective, we could compare that to the Jumper T Pro, which has similar settings up top. These are momentaries and these are 3 positions, but it also has some sliders here if you want them. And the Radiomaster Zorro is the most full featured with 1, 2, 3, 4 switches, some sliders, and some momentary buttons. Another thing that seems to be missing from the Commando is these buttons, the sys, model, return, page forward, page back, and the jog wheel. And these buttons are not used to control your aircraft. They're used to move through and manipulate the menu of the radio itself. The Commando 8 has implemented these functions with these two joysticks, if you will. They're 5-way joysticks, left, right, up, down, and depress. And you can see, just barely, maybe you can see, this is marked here as back, model, and menu. So you would press this joystick to the right to go into the menu, to the left to go back, and down to go into the, that's essentially the sys key on other radios. Whereas this joystick is used to move left, right, up, down through the menus. And this is something that you'll get used to if you own the radio and operate it on a day-to-day basis. But it is kind of a weird decision. Like, why wouldn't you just give me some actual buttons instead of making me kind of memorize what each joystick does? It's going to make it harder for beginners to follow tutorials, because I'm going to say in the tutorial, press the menu key, and all the other radios have a menu key or a model key or a sys key, and this radio doesn't. You'll be like, where's my menu key? On the underside of the radio, we've got a slot for an SD card, and it does come with an SD card. So with other radios, you have to buy your own SD card and put the SD card contents on it in order to get the full function of the radio. They're providing that for you. However, I do have to point out, it is a, well, it's SanDisk branded. I guess maybe it's okay. A lot of times the factory provided SD cards that come with these radios are absolute trash quality and die in 6 months, and you end up buying a new one anyway. I can't say for sure whether that's true of this one or not, but it's nice that they included it, I guess. Right here we've got the USB-C port that is used for charging the internal battery, and it is used for backing up the radio, as well as you can use the radio as a joystick in your favorite FPV flight simulator. The battery is listed as a 4,000 milliamp hour 1S 2P pack. So that suggests to me that it might be two 18650 cells inside, because 18650 cells are usually 2,000 milliamp hour rated. Worth pointing out that these covers here, the batteries are not in there. If you take these covers off, you don't get battery bays like here on the Jumper T Pro. So if you were going to change the batteries, you'd have to open the radio up. iFlight have done something interesting with the gimbals. They have emulated DJI in the style of gimbals. The gimbal ends screw off, as you can see here, and DJI does that so they can stuff, you can put it in your bag or something without risking breaking the gimbal. That's kind of cool, I guess. However, DJI gives you some place on the controller to snap the gimbals, and I don't see that anywhere on this radio. So if you did take them off, you'd have to figure out a way not to lose them. It also means that if you were to want to get custom stick ends, like these stick ends are thumb grippies, thumbgrippies.com. I actually did a review of a whole bunch of different custom stick ends you could put on your gimbals. I'll put a link to that down in the video description if you're looking for, it makes a surprising difference in your experience of flying to have the stick ends fit your grip and your flight style. Well, if you wanted to do that, with this radio, you couldn't do it because it doesn't use the standard size and type of stick end mounting. As far as the quality of the gimbals goes, you're not going to get ultra high quality gimbals on a radio in this price point. But the good news is that as long as the gimbals are mediocre to adequate, they're not going to hold you back as a pilot. High-end gimbals give a nicer tactile experience. And yes, technically high-end gimbals will have less jitter and more precise control, but usually it's your fingers and your brain that are what's holding you back. I do have to acknowledge, here, let me turn this radio off and back on again real quick. I do have to acknowledge that there is, do you see that there's this little bit of slop at the bottom of the throttle? That when the throttle is all the way down, you can still push it before it actually hits up against the stop. And that is also, you know, it's not quite as bad at the top. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Maybe that's an adjustment. There's a spring inside that adjusts whether the throttle is centering or not. And maybe it's not completely loosened up. That's kind of weird though. Maybe we should see if we can address that. We're going to just carefully pull this back cover off, because usually there are springs that are accessible, or screws. Yeah, I can see the screws right down in here. I'm going to have to look up which screw does what though. Yeah, so this screw here is the throttle centering screw, and you can see that if I back that out, now the throttle is recentering. So I wonder if I just thoroughly screw that in, maybe that little bit of springiness at the bottom is going to go away. Fingers crossed. No, it's still there. It's not quite as bad, but it's still there. One effect of this sloppiness at the bottom of the throttle is that sometimes when you power the radio on,
Welcome
you
to
will get
EdgeTX.
a throttle warning
warning.
saying throttle not idle. And you'll have to press down a little bit more on the throttle before it will start up. The fix for this is to properly calibrate the gimbals on the radio. I've got a tutorial about how to do that. It's a good step to do when you get any new radio, but there is a way to do it wrong and a way to do it right. I go into detail in my tutorial video, and I'll put a link to that also down in the video description. Now, speaking of quality gimbals, the Radiomaster Zorro really takes the cake here with its AGO1 gimbals. The AGO1 are a full metal CNC gimbal, and I demonstrate in my review of those gimbals that there is no slop at the bottom, and they just feel really good. It doesn't come with those gimbals out of the box. Maybe you can order it with them. They cost extra. It's a substantial price uptick compared to the stock cost of any of these radios. But if you are looking for the absolute best possible gimbals you can get in a radio in this form factor, the Radiomaster Zorro should be high on your list. Until now, we've avoided talking about what might be the most important distinguishing characteristic of this radio. And it's going to be the topic that helps us decide which of these is the radio that you actually want to get. And we are going to do that before the end of the video. And the characteristic that we haven't talked about yet is what kind of radio module or protocol is in the radio. Now, all of these radios have a built-in RF module. You can see this antenna on all of them. And some, I think all of them, will also have the option to have a module bay in the back of the radio, which means you can get a third-party module and install it in the radio and improve the range or performance of the radio link that the radio uses. But obviously, it's better to buy a radio with the control link that you actually want built in. And then later, if you want something else, you could buy an external module, but you probably get the right thing to start with. So what are our options for the different modules that this radio can be purchased with? Now, for the Commando 8, the choices that we have for these modules include a 2.4 gigahertz Express LRS module, a 900 megahertz Express LRS module, a 2.4 gigahertz CC2500 module, and then those things can be mix and matched in various combinations. Let's talk about what those three things are. Express LRS is a very long range, very high penetration, very low latency, high performance, modern control link. Sounds pretty compelling, doesn't it? The reason that it's better than the alternatives is mostly that it's just newer, and also that the devs are incredibly, incredibly passionate and devoted and do amazing work. Not to take anything away from them. With Express LRS, you can go, well, under optimal conditions, you can go 50 kilometers or more. And even if you never intend to go that far, you still, it's very nice to know that while you're flying around at your local park or in your backyard, there's basically no chance that you're going to lose link and fail safe. The alternative is the CC2500 module. And the CC2500 is, it's nice because it binds to FreeSky branded receivers, and FreeSky receivers are very, very popular. There are many bind and fly quads, basically all bind and fly quads can be ordered with FreeSky receivers in them. Tiny Whoops have built-in FreeSky receivers. It is probably the most popular, certainly in the budget category, receiver today. It's not as new and it's not as high performance, and most importantly, under ideal conditions, FreeSky is going to give you maybe 1 to 2 kilometers of range, and then under real-world conditions, maybe just 300 or 500 meters, or maybe less. So FreeSky, much less performance, but much more common than Express LRS. So I, of course, am going to steer you towards Express LRS, but especially if you fly a lot of Tiny Whoops, which come with built-in FreeSky receivers, although many Tiny Whoops today are coming with built-in Express LRS receivers, so that's changing too. I'm going to steer you towards Express LRS, though. And in Express LRS, there are two choices. You can either get 2.4 gigahertz or you can get 900 megahertz, and that's just which frequency band does the radio use. I'm going to steer you towards 2.4 gigahertz, unless you know that you are doing really long range stuff, 30, 50 kilometers, or unless you know that you need the absolute most penetration through thick concrete possible, 2.4 gigahertz is going to be the one to choose. So take a look now at the product listing and let's look at the prices of these different options. So we've got the option here to buy it with a 2.4 gigahertz radio only for $129. That's Express LRS 2.4 gig. We can buy it with Express LRS 915 megahertz only for $140. Or we can get the built-in CC2500 chip combined with either Express LRS 2.4 or Express LRS 900 megahertz. And those options are $169 for the 900 megahertz combo or $169 for the 2.4 gigahertz combo. So I would say that if you're looking for a combination of the best performance possible, but also some backwards compatibility for those older FreeSky receivers, this one might be the option. Or if you're just looking to get started on the right foot, the Express LRS 2.4 gig option would be the one I would suggest. But we got to do some price and performance comparison against the other options that are out there, and some other comparisons that may mean that one of those other two radios we saw is actually the one you're going to prefer. So don't decide yet. So then, which of these radios is the one that's best for you? I do want to say I've got full reviews of the Zorro and the Jumper T Pro on my channel, and I would suggest you check them out before you plunk your money down, because there's obviously going to be little gotchas that I can't get into in a more overview context, which, well, we're still focusing here on the Commando 8. But this is the first time I've had all three of these radios now, which clearly sort of slot into the same segment, and I am going to try to steer you in the right direction toward the one that is going to work best for you. Before I do that, though, I'd just like to take a second to let you know I have a Patreon page. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. If you value this content and you want me to keep making it, please consider joining up. If today's the day that I earned your support, this is the video that pushed you over the edge when you went, dang, Bardwell, I might have bought the wrong radio, or something like that. The link is down below. If today's not the day yet, well, then I'm going to keep making content. I hope you keep watching the content, and maybe that day will come. Okay, then. Going into this comparison, we're going to assume that you want a gamepad style radio, which all of these three are. We're going to assume you don't want one of these great big honking things, because it's obviously not in the roundup. And the other thing we're going to talk about is that you want Express LRS. Now, all three of these radios can be ordered with a FreeSky CC2500 version. And in that case, there's not going to be any difference between them in terms of their output power and the other sort of capabilities that they have. But if you do get the Express LRS version, there is a difference in their output power and therefore their range. The Radiomaster Zorro has the least output power of any of them at 250 milliwatts. The iFlight Commando 8 has twice as much at 500 milliwatts, and the Jumper T Pro has the most at 1 watt. This difference definitely does matter. A difference between 250 milliwatts and 1 watt is approximately a doubling of range, all else being equal. 250 milliwatts is enough to get you pretty good range under many conditions. But if you're pushing the performance limits of the system, and especially if you're trying to get penetration through obstacles, you may find that the 250 milliwatt output of the Zorro is less than you would desire. 500 milliwatts sits somewhere in the middle, and of course the 1 watt of the T Pro is the most. You can buy a module and put it on the back of the radios and get more output power, but you'd have to really want the radio in some other way to make that compromise. The Radiomaster Zorro clearly differentiates itself in having far more switches, knobs, and other controls than the other two radios, and it has the option of doing the AGO1 gimbals, which are really high-end all-metal CNC gimbals. They're the best gimbals of the three, no question. It also is a little bit bigger, and in my opinion, the ergonomics, it's just the most comfortable and natural in the hand. Zorro also has the largest screen of the three. If you do a lot of programming in the field, you might like that. Other people feel that it's sort of wasted. I wanted a gamepad style radio because I wanted it to be small and compact, and then they stuck this giant screen on it and ruined it. I happen to like the big screen because I do a lot of sort of programming of the radio, but other people would prefer the smaller screen on the other two radios. The Commando and the Jumper T Pro both have more limited controls in terms of their switches and buttons. The T Pro, however, does have this 6 switches across the front, which can be programmed to do most anything anything that you want. And the T Pro also has a jog wheel and some dedicated menu buttons, as well as some trim switches, which could be repurposed if you preferred to, whereas the Commando 8 does not. In addition, if you fly fixed wings and you actually need real trim switches to adjust the trim on your aircraft while you're flying, the Commando 8 doesn't have that, and that's probably going to be a deal breaker for you. Both the T Pro and the Zorro have a buddy box input. If that is something that you know you're going to want, then you already know what that is. And if that's not something that you know you're going to want, then it's probably relatively obscure and you're probably not going to use it. The Commando 8 does not have a buddy box input. So if you're going to do any kind of head tracker stuff or anything like that, it doesn't look like the Commando 8 is going to be able to do it. And lastly, let's talk about price. And before we do that, we got to acknowledge prices are changing like crazy these days. They go up, they go down. I'm talking about the prices as of today. In the future, they will probably go up, but this is how it stands today. We talked about that the Commando 8, the 2.4 gigahertz Express LRS version, was $130. For the Zorro, the Express LRS 2.4 gigahertz version is $120. And for the T Pro, the Express LRS 2.4 gigahertz version is only $90. So the T Pro is going to come in at the lowest price. The Zorro and the iFlight Commander are pretty comparable and not that much more. Based on all of that, hopefully you're leaning in a particular direction. Which one would I pick? I have to say, I think the Zorro is the one that I would pick. And I say that even though it has the lowest output power of the three and therefore the least range. If I really cared about that, I would get a 1-watt Happy Model Slim Pro module and put it on the back. But I still think this would be the radio for me. I like the large screen. The ergonomics are the best. I have some complaints about the ergonomics, and I talk about them in the full review video, link down below. It also has relatively short battery life, but I would probably learn to deal with that because I love how many switches and controls it has, and just the ergonomics, especially because I am a pinch grip versus a thumb grip. That is the one that personally I would pick. I think the Commando has a lot of potential, especially with its 500 milliwatt output power, but they left a lot of things out in terms of like the switches and controls and stuff. And especially at the price, I think between the Commando, if I was leaning towards the Commando, I feel like I would just go to the Jumper T Pro and get that 1-watt output power. And well, there are some complaints about it too. You can go watch the review if you really want to. That would be my order of selection though. The Zorro #1 for me, the T Pro, and unfortunately, the Commando would probably be #3 for me for those reasons. But maybe you don't agree. Maybe your priorities are not the same as mine. And if that's true, you can decide which one of these to get. And there are links down in the video description where you can pick them up. And those links are not just there for your convenience. They are affiliate links. And that means when you click that link, and then you make any purchase at the affiliated store, I get a small commission. And it's another way you can support me. It doesn't cost you a penny. You just click the link and go make your purchase. I'll also put cards on screen for your convenience. There are links in the video description to these reviews, but I'll also put cards on screen to the reviews of the T Pro and the Zorro, so you can check those out. What do you think? If you've already watched those reviews and you have an opinion, was the Commando worth waiting for? This thing has been announced months ago and people were excited about it. What's your opinion? Am I off the mark about 2.4 gigahertz versus 900 megahertz Express LRS? Tell me your thoughts down in the comments. I'm always interested to hear it. Happy flying.